The stars had long since forgotten Earth. Its name, once whispered in ancient galactic charts, had been overwritten by the empires that followed. Empires of silicon, of gas, of hive minds and crystalline monarchs. Humanity, a footnote in the ancient annals of spacefaring civilizations, had faded into oblivion, presumed extinct after the collapse. And so, when a single vessel, sleek, silent, unannounced, broke through the ether above the diplomatic skies of Tyrellian Prime, the galaxy did not know how to react. It was a ship unlike any other. No transponder, no identifying frequency. It bore no weapons, no visible crew, and no allegiance markings. It moved with an elegance that made even the Ilari whispercraft seem archaic. Observers in the orbital command rings called an apparition a ghost, a trick of space-time, but it was very real. Counselor Valoran of the Lathari Dominion stood at the high observatory of the Galactic Assembly Tower, his tendrils twitching with unease. Around him, representatives from over 300 sentient species chattered, muttered, and broadcast frantic alerts back to their homeworlds. The ship, now designated Unknown Object 1, had taken a stationary orbit directly over the Assembly's most secure planet. No threat had been made, yet no entity had ever approached Tyrellian Prime uninvited. The implications were tectonic. Any response yet? Valoran asked, not turning to his aide. Negative, replied Enna, her voice mechanical and flawless. The android assistant was keyed to monitor all known frequencies. The object is emitting a single signal on a decaying loop. Play it. The room went silent as the message pulsed through the translation matrix. It was in an old Earth dialect, filtered into Galactic Common. We come in peace. Observe and learn. That was all. 3 times it repeated before silence returned. Valoran leaned forward, his silvered eyes narrowing. Humans, he whispered. Across the assembly, the name passed like an electrical charge. Ancient, impossible. Myths told of a race too ambitious, too reckless, too emotional to survive the Great Expansion. They had fractured under their own weight, consumed by war, disease, and arrogance. No verified human artifact had been found in centuries. No ambassador, no signal, no wreckage. And yet, the ship, it didn't just resemble human engineering. It surpassed it. In the back of the chamber, Ambassador Ixal Karn of the Ilari Conclave, a crystalline intellect seated in a field of sound, tilted his frame toward Valoran. If it is human, then it is a remnant, a mistake, a malfunctioning AI perhaps. Or a message, Valoran replied. By the 3rd rotation, the galaxy was aflame with speculation. The Norathi Syndicate issued an immediate bounty, capture or destroy. The Shildari temples declared it a divine omen. Traders rerouted their fleets. Soldiers armed their battle stations. Some feared an invasion. Others, something worse, a judgment. The Galactic Council convened a special session, the first in over 80 cycles. Every seat filled. Holoprojections shimmered with faces from 1,000 worlds. At the center of it all, a slowly rotating hologram of the ship pulsed with the same red beacon that blinked from its tip, steady, unyielding. They're watching us, said Chief Analyst Rylosen, voice hoarse from lack of rest. This thing is studying us, scanning our infrastructure, tracking our defense satellites. It is impossible to jam or trace. Every attempt to board it has failed. Our crafts are repelled by what I can only call intuition. Meaning? Asked the Velkarin warlord, his voice like gravel-grinding stone. Meaning, Rylosen said, it knows what we're trying before we act. The silence that followed was thicker than vacuum. Outside, the ship remained motionless. It had not fired, had not moved, had not so much as flickered, but its presence was louder than a battle cry. Valoran returned to his private chambers, watching the news feed spiral in chaos. Civilian protests broke out on 5 rim worlds. Conspiracy theories flooded the datasphere. Some said it was a test by the Assembly itself. Others claimed it was a ghost from a lost timeline. A few began to idolize it. He leaned over his desk, brought up the archives. The humans had been dreamers. Brutal, yes, but visionaries. They had seeded Mars, built star sails, mapped wormholes. But they burned too fast. That was a consensus. The collapse shattered their homeworld, leaving only fragments. Then he paused. A recovered message, dated 2 centuries past. A cryptic signal from the outer exoplanet sectors, long dismissed. Human in origin, encrypted, but with one word clearly visible in ancient script. Hope. He stared at it, pulse quickening. The next day, the assembly voted. An envoy ship, unarmed, ceremonial, would approach the craft, establish contact, and deliver a formal greeting. Against Valoran's advisement, they sent a delegation from the hierarchs of neutral space. 5 elite ambassadors, escorted by peace drones, advanced toward a vessel under full broadcast. As they neared the anomaly, every eye in the quadrant watched. Systems paused. Breath held. The human ship reacted. It opened. Not violently, not with weapons. A portal shimmered into view on its hull, a perfect circle, smooth and dark as obsidian. From within, light spilled, shifting color like liquid crystal. And then a voice, not from speakers, not from comms, but inside the minds of every sentient observer. We are humanity's last will. We come not to conquer, nor to ask. We are here to remind you what you left behind. The delegation froze, momentarily paralyzed. One of them, an Arishian empath, collapsed in tears. They remember everything, she sobbed. Every species, every war, every kindness. They never forgot. The portal closed. No one moved. The delegation returned, untouched. No scans revealed new data, no weapons exchanged. And yet, the galaxy had changed. Valoran watched the ship hang in the stars, its red eye ever glowing. He knew it then. This was not an invasion. It was an awakening. And the galaxy had just opened its eyes. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It arrived in silence. Across the galaxy's most fortified observatories, the human ship was reclassified from anomaly to strategic threat. Not because it fired, not because it moved, but because it didn't. That was the terror, restraint. In the war rooms of the Velcrin Empire, Admiral Threx slammed a clawed fist against a projection screen. You're telling me this thing shut down 3 of our cruisers with no contact? His science officer bowed, sensors trembling. Yes, Admiral. No signatures detected. The weapons didn't malfunction. They disarmed themselves. Targeting systems ceased operating the moment they attempted to lock on. Threx narrowed his 4 eyes. Sabotage? No. It was as if the ships obeyed it. On Torellian Prime, Valoran stood in the Senate's inner chamber, surrounded by a smaller, wartime quorum. The vote had shifted in 24 hours. Skepticism had turned to fear. The incident with the Velcrin fleet had spread like plasma fire. 3 ships, fully armed, had approached the vessel in defiance of Council sanction. None had been destroyed, no explosion, no death, but they had returned inert. Their crews claimed no memory of the encounter. We are dealing with technology beyond our axis of comprehension, said Rilo Sen, pacing as his holographic model spun around him. I've observed 3 unifying properties: instant data override, structural morphing, and gravitational manipulation at the subatomic scale. Valoran folded his hands. And you're sure it's human? The design traces ancient Terran mathematics. The golden ratio is embedded in its systems. There's even Terran linguistic structure in its communication AI. But this is no colony ship. It's a statement. The central conflict deepened with every hour. What did the humans want? No demands were made. No directives issued. The ship's presence alone had already undone centuries of diplomatic balance. Even the Arity Mindfold, an artificial intelligence collective that spanned 22 star systems, offered a rare message of caution. This is not a weapon in traditional sense. It is a philosophy given form. Yet the galaxy's predators didn't deal in philosophy. The Norathi Syndicate, emboldened by their private fleets and economic influence, sent their strike craft toward the orbiting vessel. The attack was short, almost invisible. Dozens of dark ships, shielded with spectral cloaks, swarmed the human ship from all vectors. Their weapons fired in silent unison. Nothing landed. Beams curved. Missiles veered mid-flight. Several ships spiraled out of control, their engines suddenly offline. One vessel dematerialized entirely, leaving no trace. The rest withdrew, damaged and terrified. There was no retaliation. Later, analysis would show every crew member aboard had experienced a different hallucination mid-attack, a memory, a regret, a loved one long gone. The ship hadn't destroyed them. It had spoken to them, one by one. News feeds across the core worlds exploded. Artists painted the ship as divine. Dissenters claimed it was an elaborate simulation. But beneath it all, a darker sentiment spread. The fear that the last surviving fragment of humanity was untouchable. Back on Terrellian Prime, Valoran met privately with Rilo Sen. The analyst's face was haggard, skin pale from lack of sleep. He placed a shimmering cube on the table and activated it. A grainy simulation of the ship flickered above them. It's not just reacting, Vale. It's predicting. It knows what we'll do before we decide. Valoran raised an eyebrow. Precognition? No, comprehension. The ship operates on what I believe is a quantum thought lattice. It exists in a state of potential interaction with every observer. It doesn't calculate probabilities. It understands intention, and it adjusts. Valoran stood in silence. Then, quietly, this was not built in desperation. This was built with certainty. Meanwhile, the galaxy's edges burned. Civil unrest flared. Worlds that had languished under oppressive regimes saw in the ship a symbol of liberation. On Cologne 9, protesters painted human silhouettes on government walls. On the twin moons of Orin 2, children played with models of the ship, reenacting the repulsion of the Norathi fleet. And still, the vessel did not move. When the Galactic Assembly met once more, the hall was full of fury and fear. Some called for negotiation. Others demanded immediate neutralization. But there was no agreement. The presence of the ship had fractured old alliances. Even the trade networks faltered as security became uncertain. The tipping point came not from an attack, but an invitation. For the first time since its arrival, the ship opened a transmission line. It was unencrypted, direct, and impossibly precise. One message delivered to one being, Valoran. The moment he accepted, his chambers were filled with an ocean of stars. Not a hologram, something more immersive. And then a figure appeared. Human, vaguely, genderless, ageless, composed of light and memory. "We are not what you fear," it said, the voice both intimate and infinite. "We are not a warning. We are a mirror." Valoran tried to speak, but the voice continued. "Your civilizations have grown vast, but brittle. You have forgotten humility, forgotten how to wonder without conquering. We have returned not as saviors, nor as judges, but as evidence." He stepped forward, or at least he thought he did. What evidence? That growth is still possible. That extinction is not the end. That peace is stronger when it is chosen with power in hand. The vision faded. The stars receded. He was alone again. That night, he issued a private message to the Galactic Council. "Do not provoke the ship. It is not our enemy." But it was too late. In a rogue sector on the edge of Velkaran space, an ambitious general ignored the cease order. Determined to seize glory, he activated a planet-scale EMP weapon aimed at the human vessel's orbit. The pulse was unleashed and stopped, frozen mid-discharge. The weapon shut down. Across 5 light years, all sensors recorded the same impossible occurrence. Time itself stalled. The pulse hung in space like a sculpture of energy. Then, with no sound or signal, it reversed, collapsed into itself. Gone. A single message appeared in every system, every frequency, every language. "We are capable of violence. We choose not to be." From that moment, the galaxy was no longer curious. It was reverent. The central conflict had become clear. Not war, not diplomacy, but a reckoning of ideals. The ship was not a threat because it could kill. It was a threat because it refused to. And Valoran, now seen as the unofficial liaison, understood the gravity of his role. The ship had chosen to speak to him. That alone made him both target and symbol. He looked to the stars above his city's dome, the red pinprick of light from the ship, blinking calmly in the blackness. He whispered, "What do you want us to become?" But the ship gave no answer. Not yet. The assembly hall had never been this divided. Beneath its vaulted crystalline ceiling, representatives once governed through tradition, ritual, and consensus. But now, fracture lines are split across its diplomatic core like stress cracks in frozen glass. The arrival of the human ship had turned doctrine into doubt. Valoran watched as one delegate after another took the floor, some calling for appeasement, others urging a unified strike. No one spoke with certainty. Even the most militant voices now hesitated, unsure of their own convictions. They were no longer debating a threat. They were debating an idea. "This construct," barked Chancellor Vrax of the Norathi, his segmented jaws clacking with disdain, "is a test, a riddle designed to weaken our unity. Do not be deceived by its silence. Its purpose is conquest through fear. That is fear speaking," Counter-Ambassador Lyra of the Arisian Harmonate. Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with awe. "It has done nothing to harm us. It only asks that we see ourselves." Vrax scoffed. "And how many empires have fallen by first looking into the mirror?" The chamber dissolved into chaos. Dozens of translation spheres buzzed simultaneously, distorting voices across species and syntaxes. Valoran did not speak. He knew better. Words would not calm this tide. Only experience would. In the lower sectors of the galaxy, experience was already blooming, often violently. On the industrial moons of Etora Prime, workers staged walkouts demanding access to the ship's broadcast data. Rumors spread that the ship contained not only technology, but truths, blueprints for clean energy, free memory expansion, even cures to long-eradicated plagues. The Arity Mindfold, usually a passive observer, published a rare statement. "The presence of this vessel accelerates cognitive curiosity. Do not resist it. Evolve." That alone triggered uprisings on 6 outpost colonies. And through it all, the ship hovered silently above Torellian Prime, its red beacon blinking like a patient heartbeat. It did not interfere. It did not explain. It simply remained. On the 4th cycle since its arrival, a new message appeared. This time it was public, broadcast into every mind, every screen, every neuroreceptor. Knowledge will be shared. Violence will not. The message was followed by a data burst, non-weaponized, non-encrypted, filled with schematics for sustainable agriculture, anti-gravity construction, quantum communication, and more. It bypassed firewalls. It translated itself. And the galaxy exploded again. Within hours, micro-civilizations began forming around the data. Scientists formed alliances independent of government. Fringe worlds opened communication with one another, bypassing interstellar protocols. The old order strained. In the assembly, Valoran met privately with Lyra. They stood in the observatory, looking out at the still ship above the blue curve of the planet. "This is more dangerous than war," Lyra said, arms folded. "They're changing us." Valoran nodded. "Not with weapons. With relevance. The old systems no longer fit." "They never did," she said softly. He turned toward her, searching her face for fear. There was none, only acceptance. "They want us to remake ourselves," she continued. "But they won't show us how. That's the test." On the 4th day after the broadcast, a coalition of fringe powers attempted to hijack the signal. They rerouted galactic satellites to trap and duplicate the data stream for exclusive use. It lasted 13 seconds. Every hijacking node shut down. Not disabled, reformatted. They rebooted broadcasting Beethoven. No one understood why. The effect was devastating, not just militarily, but philosophically. The ship wasn't punishing them. It was mocking them, not cruelly, but with indifference. A gentle but undeniable show of superiority. In that moment, more than any other, the galaxy realized the humans were not returning to reclaim. They were returning to remind. Valoran received another private transmission that night. No voice this time, just an image, a seed. He stared at it for hours. At the same time, on the trade moon of Selari, a spontaneous gathering formed. No leaders, no banners, just beings from every walk of life, sitting together in silence beneath the projection of a human ship. They did nothing but watch. The galaxy's oldest philosopher, Jax 10 of the dust world Nevern, was brought to the scene by press demand. His voice, dry as wind-blown ash, was broadcast across hundreds of systems. When a silent teacher arrives, he said, "The wise do not speak. They listen." That quote was repeated so often, it became a movement. Back in the assembly, Chancellor Vrax was assassinated, not by enemies, but by his own inner circle. His insistence on war had been interpreted as weakness. The Norathi delegation splintered, half defecting to an emergent coalition, now calling itself the Accord Reflection. Vale Orin watched these shifts not with pride or fear, but with a growing sense of responsibility. He had been chosen, or perhaps simply seen. Late one night, unable to sleep, he visited the Council archives. There, alone among data vaults older than most stars, he found something unexpected. A letter, dated over 600 cycles past. Human origin, real ink, real paper, preserved from a pre-collapse outpost. It read, "We know you will forget us. That is the way of civilizations. We burned too hot. We died too young. But we will leave behind something, not to be worshipped, not to be feared, but to be remembered. If you find this, then we did not vanish. We grew." Vale Orin clutched the letter. The words echoed not through his ears, but through time itself. It was a message not just from the past, but to the future, to now. He walked to the nearest console and opened a secure channel to every known assembly representative. His voice was calm but resolute. "We must decide not whether to destroy this ship," he said, "but whether to become worthy of its memory." There was no response at first, but when the quorum reconvened the next day, the war proposals were gone. In their place were questions. Hard, raw, vital questions. Who are we now? What do we stand for? What must we unlearn? And in orbit above them all, the human ship blinked once more, still watching, still waiting. The red beacon went dark on the 43rd day. No alarm was raised, no weapon deployed. The ship simply ceased broadcasting. It hovered in silence, untouched and untouched still, but its singular pulse, the rhythmic signal that had come to symbolize a quiet revolution, vanished. That absence echoed louder than any declaration. Vale Orin sat alone in the twilight chamber of his residence, the sun setting in fractured gold to the prismed windows. For the first time in weeks, no transmissions awaited him, no emergency meetings or factional pleadings. Just stillness, the kind he had almost forgotten how to bear. Across the galaxy, life began to shift not in shock, but in slow momentum. In the scientific academies of the Arity, children learned from translated human educational archives, their minds accelerating beyond expectations. On the algae colonies of Deshra 4, famine was erased through newly adopted Terran hydrofusion techniques. Even the war-born children of the Velcrin outposts were being taught to engineer, not annihilate. Something fundamental had changed. It wasn't unity. The galaxy had never truly known such a thing, but it was something more subtle. A trend, a current of transformation so broad that even those resisting it found themselves swept along. The Accord of Reflection now held sway over nearly a third of the inner systems, not through force, but through what they offered: open access to the knowledge shared by the ship. There were no rulers in the Accord, only stewards. Lyra had become its de facto voice, delivering weekly addresses that rarely promised anything, but asked much. Her latest had ended with a question that echoed in many languages. "If we are not afraid anymore, what will we build?" Vale Orin remembered watching her say it, her eyes full of fatigue, her posture slouched from the weight of responsibility. And yet, there was hope in her voice, a quiet, human sort of hope. The ship still lingered above Torellian Prime, inert and unresponsive. Probes now passed through its gravitational veil without resistance. Scans detected nothing alive, nothing artificial. It had become an object once more, a monument or perhaps a gravestone, but its silence only deepened the need to act. And so, the galaxy began its cautious evolution. In the orbital factories of Zalathon, artisans melded human design into their constructs. The long-ignored Letherian artists now sold sculptures of minimalist Terran cities shaped from memory. New dialects emerged, blending galactic common with old Earth idioms. Even the most war-hardened soldiers began to tattoo the emblem of the ship across their bodies, not as a conquest, but a question. Vale Orin walked through the central district of Tyrellian's capital with no guards. Citizens nodded but did not approach. He was not a leader anymore, not in the old sense. He was a witness, a carrier of context, and in some ways, that was heavier than command. He passed a group of younglings clustered beneath a hologram tree, watching a reenactment of the ship's first appearance. In this version, dramatized for youthful minds, the ship spoke with warmth and purpose, like an ancient teacher from myth. "Do you think it will come back?" one of them asked. "It never left," another replied. Perhaps they were both right. That night, under the stars, the ship stirred, not visibly, not dramatically, but every system, every comm channel, every gravimetric sensor, every thought receptor registered a pulse. Not red, not threatening. Blue, a color of memory. The message was simple. You are ready. And then the ship moved. It did not accelerate. It disappeared. Not as an object fleeing through space, but as a presence vanishing from reality. No trace, no trail, only a vacancy where something sacred had once been. In the vacuum of its absence, a million voices fell silent. Some wept, others prayed. Many simply looked up and felt the vastness of the cosmos again, not as a threat, but as an invitation. In the assembly, still scarred by conflict but not broken, Lyra addressed the council without preamble. She wore no regalia, only plain robes. "The humans left us no map," she said. "No commandments, no agenda, only a choice." She paused, letting the words breathe. "We can return to what we were. Suspicious, isolated, trembling behind our technologies. Or we can continue forward, uncertain, but aware that the universe might be asking more of us than survival." No vote was cast. No laws were passed. But the silence that followed her speech was a kind of consent. The galaxy had turned a page. Vale Orin spent his final years not in office, but on a floating research habitat orbiting a minor moon. He taught, not politics, but observation. He spoke of watching a civilization relearn humility. He told students that the most powerful message a species could send wasn't "we have returned," but "we endured." And sometimes in the deepest hours of night, he would look at the stars and wonder if the ship still watched, not as a guardian, not as a god, but as a kindred witness, floating somewhere in the silence between galaxies, where the next forgotten race might one day awaken. And if they did, maybe the ship would come again. Or maybe, just maybe, they would already be ready,